Welcome, everyone. I just put in the chat what we are going to do. So today it's virtual facilitation practice. We have been doing this gathering monthly since September 2020. Originally, just to get people together in the midst of the confusion that happened at the beginning of the pandemic. So we trained lots of people in virtual facilitation and also supported people along the way with a space for people just to be together with other facilitators, learn something, have fun, expand possibilities. So we have seen lots of people creating connections through virtual spaces along these years. And we decided to keep doing this every month. And I have the habit of inviting amazing people. I just knock at their doors and call them to come. In this case, I am with Charles in his work with the Community of Deans, which is an amazing work to mentor people through the community building process and all the elements that are around it. I didn't notice many of them. I started noticing lots of things reading his books and being in this community that he's nurturing. So it's a big pleasure and honor to have Charles with us. He's a very busy guy, always traveling, always giving keynotes and leading lots of stuff. So thank you, Charles, for making the space, for being here. And over to you. Give us a little snippet. Maybe introduce yourself properly.
All right. I'm happy to give a snippet. I just want to give a sense. I don't know how much introduction you've already made about my work before I dive in and I leave everybody behind. Do you all know what I talk about? Was there introduction to that, Fernando, or am I just a guy on a microphone right now?
I know you talk about community and you wrote a book that won an award, and I'm very curious about more. But that's it for me.
Okay. All right. So obviously you can Google me later if you want and learn more. That is not wrong, David. I've written 3 books to date, and a couple of them won awards, but who's counting? And then my work, I'm best known right now for writing about training people in leadership roles, both formal and informal, on connecting people around shared values and purpose. And in my work, we call people come together around shared values and purpose, coming together in community. And in my work, I define community simply as a group of people who share mutual concern for one another. That's it. And that's important to say because the research is pretty clear that we're almost certainly living in the loneliest era, at least in American history, but probably people history, because we have the technology to do that. And I'm not going to talk about the many forces that have gotten us here, but suffice it to say, those forces are strong and they're growing, and they're unusual for any generation before ours. And so my work has become ever more relevant because people who care about others in our time want to get better at bringing people together. And it turns out we generally as a people are terrible at it. And then organizations reach out to me typically because they realize at some point that it's important that the people that are important for success, be they internal or external in the organization, it's important that they're connected. And as a general rule, I've figured out that the organizations that reach out to me generally are working in high stakes challenges, which is code for people die when they get it wrong. They're working in dynamic contexts, which is to say the playbook from 2018 is no longer relevant. And then lastly, there's usually highly talented and or highly skilled people that need to cooperate on those high stakes challenges. And so often I'm talking to people who are working in education, healthcare, military activities, and then certain areas of high innovation tech. And in all those cases, if they get it wrong, people die. So that's just a general sense of like where I'm at in the world. And I've written hundreds and hundreds of pages in this, so we're not going to go through it, but just know that what we're going to touch on today is just a point. Fernando specifically asked me to introduce to this group a concept, a term that I wrote about in my first book that I call 3 a.m. friendship or 3 a.m. friends. And usually in my work, we introduce this later when we talk about the context that we're in and where we start in building relationships in places where they're not happening. And I introduce this once we have a general sense of what do we want to put, who do we want to work with, and what do we want to put in place to facilitate these relationships growing in ways that they're not. If they're already growing, then great, don't talk to me, good on ya. But that's not usually when I'm brought in. And the 3M friendship is fairly simple. I define my work, the 3M friends, they're the people that we can call when we have an emergency at 3M. And they want the call. And I also use this term to refer to the people in our lives that if they don't call us at 3 a.m. when they have an emergency we can help with, that's a problem for us. Because when they don't call, they rob us from the opportunity to be the friends we want to be. I'm going to say it again because it's important. It refers to two types of people. People that we can call when we have an emergency at 3 a.m., say a broken pipe in Canada in February in the middle of the night, right? Who do you call? And then the people that we get upset if they don't call us when they have an emergency at 3 a.m. and they have a broken pipe in February in Canada in the middle of the night. These people don't need to be the same people, right? There may be people in your life that you would be happy to get a call at 3 a.m., but you're not going to call them. Fair enough. Or people that you would call, you get the idea. That's not important. The important part is when I'm training leadership and bringing people together in powerful and effective ways, I want us to have a sense of what are we trying to create. And there are a lot of people who brag about building community in their neighborhood, or community, an event they threw, or a festival they went to, or a concert they remembered. God bless them all. But usually they just have lists. If you have 100 people come to a neighborhood concert, that's not bad, but that's not a community. That's a list of attendees. We call it an audience. If you have a list of people who gave your neighborhood emergency fund, that's not bad, but that's a list of donors. If you go on a camping trip and a bunch of people join you, that's great, but that's a list of people who went camping. To build a community, we have to invest differently to get different results. And none of those things are bad, but I'm guessing that everybody on this call doesn't care about how much we brag about how long our lists are. If we're going to invite people, if we're going to commit to creating events, if we're going to create events, people have a certain experience at that. What we want to create at the end is relationships that support each other when we need to be resilient and adaptive, i.e. the challenges of our lives. And when we understand the 3 a.m. distinction, like what is a 3 a.m. friend, it gives us a little bit of a North Star of what we're trying to create. And I don't really care if 100 people come to your pizza festival and post about it, if then they leave 2 hours later and there aren't any relationships there that support each other being helpful. I mean, somebody else who's trying to brag about pizza promotion might brag about that. I don't care. I think people are going to eat plenty of pizza without my pizza festival. So that's one of the things that's important about the 3M friendship distinction, is that when we're coaching someone or involved in something or we're investing in something, we're really clear what we're trying to create. And it's not a bigger pizza list. The other thing that's great about this distinction is when I teach it, I can ask the room, and I can ask this room, are there people in your life that if they don't call you at 3 a.m., when you can help, i.e. give them a dry place to sleep while their house is flooded on a frozen night, are there people that you want the call and they don't know it? Because there are people that you want the call and they don't know it. It's pretty obvious what we can do to change that. And that can change a lot in your life and their life. Just to give you a sense of the context, I don't know about the rest of the world, but I know the research in the United States shows that right now, it looks like 49% of Americans, or half of us, have 3 friends or less. Half Americans do not have 4 friends. Of that 49%, 13% of all Americans and 1 out of 6 American men don't have any friends. So when we do something or just alert someone, when we do something that they create a 3M friend, or we just alert someone who's another parent at the school, someone at church, someone in your neighborhood that says, oh, by the way, I took this course, I took a webinar, and I thought of you because I'd like you to call me if you have a problem at 3 a.m. And if you don't call me and I can help, just know that's a problem for me. That can be a radical shift for someone, given that half Americans do not have 4 friends. The other thing this idea, when we play with it, reveals is when there's a lot of frustration and or self-defeating thinking about building community. And we talk about what is a 3 a.m. friend, where are they in our lives? And most people notice there are many people that they want the call. For example, my son is in elementary school, and I've met a number of parents that he's friends with, and we don't hang out a lot because we're busy. And quite frankly, I don't even know all their phone numbers, although there's a list on a spreadsheet somewhere. Virtually all those parents, if I can help them in the middle of the night in my city, and they're in a true crisis, right? There's an emergency room visit involved, right? There's a car accident involved. I want the call. I will wake up in the middle of the night to help a family in crisis at 3 a.m. that's in my city that's a parent in post-pandemic Berkeley. Said differently, when we show people that these relationships are already there, and then we encourage them to just name them, put them in the conversation, we're often revealing the community that's already there. If community is a group of people who share mutual concern for one another, and we discover there's all these people that we want to be connected to when they need us, and then we can maybe even share this idea in a room, building community looks a lot like just revealing what's already there. Because my experience is there's a lot more goodwill, there's a lot more commitment, there's a lot more generosity present in most rooms than most people are aware of. To the point where I walk around the world now, I largely just see people who want to help and just don't know how. Culturally, temporally, legally, but most people want to help. So I don't know how many minutes I've been talking now, but I like to keep it short so that I don't ramble and we give you too much. But that's the introduction to one of the ideas I put in my first book and how we use it to train people to create the connections, support each other when we're building community. Is that a good introduction, Fernando?
It's awesome. So, Carolina, shall we put them in pairs to discuss quickly in prompt networking? Yeah. Okay, so just check.
4 minutes.
Rosa and Sylvia. Okay. So 4 minutes. And do you have the questions to put in the chat? I have it here.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll put 2 questions in the chat for you. It will go with you for the breakouts. Who are your 3 a.m. friends, and how is that connected with your community building for you? So 4 minutes, we'll be in pairs, and you'll be back here in 4 minutes. So you don't have to touch anything. Just go. When the timer is gone, you'll be back here. Welcome, Victoria. We can see you now.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Oh, I think I sent just for you, Carolina, the questions. Let me put it again.
I got it.
No.
I got it.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go. See you in a bit.
Welcome back, everyone. We are gonna have another round here. Same questions is in the chat. So who are your 3 a.m. friends and how is that connected with community building for you? So same questions, but different partner now. And when we are ready, nice. And just go, 4 minutes.
Here you go.
Back.
Rosa.
Fernando.
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you, Rosa.
Carolina. In the chat and then verbally.
Yeah, in the chat. So please write in the chat any findings, any insights that you had, if you have one, or anything you want to explore more, or how was your conversation? I saw another great conversation, which is good. And sometimes it's good to look, oh, I talked to him, I talked to her, you know, like this, who you talk to. Hmm.
Or height.
That's interesting. Wow, so many good thoughts here. That's awesome. Hmm.
Yeah, it's good that we can comment on people's ideas. So it's nice to see the ripple effect. Okay, Charles, with you. And the chat
about
is
me?
open. If anyone wants to share questions or comments or raise your hand. Do you want to check what is in the chat, Charles?
I can see the chat. I don't see any questions for me
Yeah.
to respond to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with you, Charles. Next steps.
What's that?
Next steps. You did the intro. Now we can get into the contents.
Rosa, I see your hand.
Would be great. Just Charles, I'm not sorry. I bought your book. I'm looking forward to it because I'm very passionate about this area. But I just wonder if you have a lot of experience in education in general. You know, educators like to work in silos rather than in community. And, you know, do you have any tips or any insights on how they can, you know, we can basically blow down the silos, blow them out and create a sense of community?
All right, so I can speak a lot to this. So, Rosa, I'm not a professional educator in the sense that I work at a school and I teach curriculums by a certain standard, and that I'm judged by that. Although obviously in what I do, I fly around the world and I train leaders, so that's educating. But it's not with the discipline of what I think of as teachers. The education field has really picked up my work in a strong way, in large part because educators are on the front lines of the loneliness epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I know that the loneliness and isolation in education is at every level. It's at administrative level, teaching level, and student level, and even the parent level, because parents are in our culture. So I've talked to many people working on this, but I am not in the classroom, so to speak. So when we talk about bringing any group of people together that we care about from the beginning, there's always a beginning. First of all, there needs to be at least one shared value or purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Don't overthink it. It's not rocket science. It's just that if there's no shared values or purpose, then don't be surprised if people don't want to come and they certainly don't want to come back. And that sounds simple enough to me and obvious, but that's not true for everybody. For example, I heard of a school that wanted to bring together, this is even a more timely example than ever before, Jewish and Muslim students. And they thought the way to do that was to host symposia talking about the most intractable conflicts between those lineages for the last 2,000 years. Surprise, surprise. What didn't come out of that was students who felt more close, more caring, and wanted to spend more time together, right? Duh. But that's where people start. So we need to understand, well, what is the shared value and or shared purpose? One is enough to invite people in the same room. And for example, you're in Vancouver, having neighbors who want your neighborhood to be safe or want neighbors to have someone to spend time with on their downtime, or parents who would like to know other parents so their kids to spend time with, counts. Any one of those counts. But if there's nothing, then all we are is in a room wondering why we're there, right? If you're an educator and you want to know better educators, you don't have to think very hard. I think most educators would like to know other educators, be supportive and or talk through changes in the world, which are unprecedented for us. With that said, if there are educators who don't want to do that, then don't be surprised if they don't want to come, right? So we got to figure out what is the shared value and purpose. And then Fernando knows very well now that I say, for the purposes of pedagogy, the community always starts the same way every time, and it starts with an invitation. Which is to say, if there aren't invitations going out, let us not be surprised people don't come and people aren't coming together. And that's always the first question I ask when I'm approached by anybody who says, we have this school, or we have this organization, or I'm a member of the blah, 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 and we're having a hard time getting people to blah, 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 blah. I don't know them. I don't know what they do. I don't know the history. I don't know, but I can ask this. Well, what are you inviting them to? And if the answer is not very much to really cruddy things, I'm like, aha, let's start there. In my work, an invitation is defined very, very specifically. An invitation is a request to spend time where the person invited knows that somebody cares if they show up. I'm going to say that again because it's that important. An invitation is a request to spend time where the person invited knows that somebody cares if they show up. We have a name for invitations where nobody knows if anybody cares if they show up. Those are called announcements. And I can't tell you how many organizations I have physically flown to at this point where they realize that they invite nobody to nothing never because they just sent an announcement and they think that's enough. And guess what? They're talking to me. And if you look at your events and notice who actually shows up, my guess is the proportion of people who showed up usually reflect who got an actual invitation, a phone call, a conversation, right? Announcements aren't bad. We just have to recognize that when we're actually trying to bring people together in ways that matter, they're not enough. And I have a general sense of how many dozen announcements you get in your email inbox every week. I could be off by factor 10, but the answer is a lot. And I have a general sense how many of those you respond to and or show up. So we need to understand that we start by inviting people to things. And that's a whole distinction I can literally go on for an hour about on nuance of invitation. We're not going to do that now. But I'll tell you, Rosa. So if you just think, well, who are the people I want to bring together, and you start inviting them, things will change. And there's a few rules of what you need to invite people to. The first one is only invite people to things that you like to do. A lot of organizations like to skip that one because they want to impress somebody like a vice president at the end of the quarter and brag about what the events they created. Only invite people to events you like to go to. If you don't believe me, let's consider the counterfactual. You invite people to things you don't like to do. How often do you think they want to come back? How often do you want to come back? How many events do you want to go to where someone invited you to something that they don't like to do? Talk a lot, drink a lot, sit in a noisy bar, whatever it is you don't like to do, don't invite them. The second thing is when you invite people to an event where your hope is, your aspiration is that they connect, they create relationships where there's connection. And I can get more granular on that if Fernando asks me to, but I'm going to skip it for now. Remember that the whole point of the invitation is for people to connect. So do not commit the catastrophic sin of thinking they need to be. And so you try to entertain them the whole time. People don't want to go to an event to meet their neighbors or meet other professionals, or in my case, meet other authors, and then have music blaring because there's fear that it'll get boring, or there's a video we have to watch, or there's a book we have to discuss, or you get the idea. Giving people an attention and an invitation is enough, right? And I've just noticed that we're in an era where there's this fear. I'll give you an example. Literally 2 weeks ago, I went to an all-day invitation-only conference for leadership at Google. And, quite frankly, the programming itself was really juvenile for me because this is my life, right? Fair enough. Not everybody has written books on leadership and flies around the world. God bless them. So really what was interesting about it was me meeting the other people who got an invitation to Google to attend an all-day conference. And in the evening, there was a Google level dinner for the 120 of us or so, where they cleared somebody with a credit card really wanted to impress us. So they had a live band there playing that was going to play music for each course that complemented each course, which is the definition of a gimmick, by the way. And then they hired this catering team to make this very artistic meal, like where they made the first course was like a palette of pastes in an art for us to mop it up. And then between the songs of the band, the chef came out and gave us a soliloquy on the next course. And then we were sitting at these tables of 8 around other people who were invited thought leaders at this conference. There was so much going on that the woman next to me, who's this internationally famous food ethnographer, leaned over and shouted right in my ear because there's a damn band playing at dinner, isn't there? And she said, "This is quite painful." And I leaned over and shouted at her, "Yes, I totally agree." And the reason I'm giving you this very clear example is they spent a ton of money on this. And they created an event that we all wanted to leave, because they didn't trust if people flew in from around the country and I drove in and found, parking to sit down for hours with other thought leaders who came in and find out about their work and why they're here and what they're doing that got attention. I don't need you to spend 5 digits to distract me. All I want is gluten-free pizza and seltzer with lime in it, and leave me alone. Now that's a hyperbolic example because it's a real example, but it's a hyperbolic one because I want you to understand how much people get this wrong. And in this case, spending probably 6 digits getting it wrong. Because they had given us gift certificates for gluten-free pizza and seltzer, we would have been happier. So invite people. If you're not inviting, let's not be surprised or ask why people aren't coming. And by the way, if they don't know that someone cares, it's not an invitation. Nobody wants another mass email. Second thing, only invite them to things you like to do. Walking around a park counts. Eating gluten-free pizza counts. Walking your dog counts. Third, invite them somewhere where there's an experience that we call in our work a campfire experience. And Fernando can talk a lot about that because all my work is based about creating a series of campfire experiences. Creating an experience where people can actually make the connection that you're inviting them to make. And if they don't like it, they won't come back. So be it. And don't concern yourselves that the people you're inviting want to be entertained, because you know what? Mostly we don't. Netflix is at home. It's running. Right. So that's a pretty long answer to your prompt, Rosa. I hope that's helpful. That's where I start. Fernando, am I not embarrassing myself yet?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
The third one, invite them somewhere to have an experience, right? Yeah.
So we call that a campfire experience. And I'm going to campfire. So I wrote a blog on this. I also speak about this for a full hour when I'm training, so I can't only introduce it to you. There's quite a bit of nuance to it, but one of the things that Google event got wrong is they didn't understand and thus create an event consistent with a campfire experience, or what we, based on the campfire principle, we call it. And campfire principle, just I coined the term for pedagogical purposes, is just this idea that what we really want is an intimate experience. And if we want to connect a large group of people, Google thought leaders or facilitators, that doesn't happen in big rooms, so-called arena spaces. The actual connection happens in, yeah, Seth Godin's right, because 8 or 10 is ridiculous. So there's a thing, Brooks, 1 second, line of communication. I'm pulling this up for you. Images. Why is this not working? Copy. So this is the Brooks lines of communication. And this will explain to you why the tables of 8 suck. And will also give you permission when you're bringing people together to segment quickly and often. Because those lines of communication burden the experience of our participants. And so that's why they're not connecting. But people who aren't trained as you are now think, well, gee, I want all these people to connect it. I should bring them all together at a big table, in a big room, at a big event, because they don't understand, yeah, well, they're in a big room, but they can't connect because nobody can handle that. Those lines of communication. It's totally burdensome. So we use a term called segmenting. As soon as somebody, if I have 15 facilitators come into a room and I want them to leave that hour and a half, 2 hour, 3 hour dinner connected, I need to make sure we segment them into segments of 5 or less at some point or most of that time. And if I don't, they might have a good time. They might think I'm smart and great, but I'm not giving them a venue where they can generate the relationships that lead to the connections that help people feel seen for who they are and accepted for who they are now, which is what needs to happen for a perception of connection to happen before you leave. Right? If I don't think you know who I am, and you just see an avatar of myself or some profile, I don't think we've connected. And if I don't give a sense that you accept me for who I am now, then I don't think we've connected. That has to happen. So, Allison, I see your hand up. Thank you for waiting while I ramble.
No worries. I actually have 2 questions for you that I've thought of now. So the first is, do you have a response for, or advice or whatever, for when someone invites you to that thing that you don't want to do? You don't know if I don't know if they want to do it, or they're just inviting me. It's that, like, they're making a mistake and inviting me to something they don't want to do. But let's
well, they
say
invited you, Allison. We can all assume they made a mistake, right? Because that's how your life works.
So yeah.
No, I was kidding, Allison. You said I think it's funny that you think if they invited you, you just assume it's a mistake.
No, but like, if it's a mistake, like when the work colleague says, hey, we really ought to, meet at the bar, to go out for a drink and meet at this bar so that we, can have time together, which is not what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, there are reasons you don't want to do that. Right.
Yeah. And so are they saying that, I don't know if she's saying that, but like, this is a real example, if she's saying that because it's a mistake that she's inviting me to something she doesn't want to do either, but she wants to get together, or like, how do you respond to that when you actually do want to build community, you do want to get to know this person, you do want to have a connection with them, but they're inviting you to something that you don't want to do? Is it simply to say, I don't really like to go to bars, it's too loud, we won't be able to talk, let's go for a walk? Or is it, or is there some other rationale? Or as David says,
so, Allison, it sounds like
curious
you have a lot
about
of
why they're
questions.
asking.
So, Allison, it sounds like you have a lot of questions about why this person is asking and why they're asking you to do that. So, I mean,
Well,
I don't know
how
this
do you
person,
respond
but
to it? Yeah.
Well,
Like,
if I were you and I'm not you and I don't know what other power dynamics are going on, but I would want to know more.
Yeah. Okay. So you respond back with a question. Is that what?
Yeah. And if you want to spend time with them and you don't want to in a bar, I don't know your context, but what comes up for me is I would say, well, gee, I'd love to spend time with you, not in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what else is going on because you're obviously flustered by this. And so I don't know what what you know about the situation that I don't.
Okay, that's helpful. Second question. So basically
Okay.
for that one, it's just, yeah, being straight with them and saying, I'd like to spend time with you, but not.
Well, that's one
that.
context. I mean, there are some cultures you can't be straight without being rude. I don't live in that culture. I'm a New Yorker,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there are places where saying you can't say no, everything is a yes, right? So you have to ask a W question.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
No,
bars
I
are
know.
terrible places to connect
So,
because
okay, so my
if
other,
you look at the
yeah,
if you look at the criteria of a campfire experience, the last criteria is all the conditions that would distract from intimate conversation have to be handled. And bars are specifically designed to distract us as much as possible. They do that with music, they do that with pretty people, they do that with lights. And where I live, they have multiple televisions running ads where people are collectively paid millions of dollars to grab our attention. That sounds like a perfect place not to have a conversation that's possibly intimate. So when someone invites me to a bar to connect, I know that they don't know what they're doing. They're using conventional wisdom. They're going to get conventional results, and I'm not going to have fun. And the first rule of inviting people to things that are effective is invite them to things that you want to do. Why? Because if we invite people to things we don't want to do, they're going to figure that out, and then we know how much they want to come back, right? But I can say, I actually don't drink alcohol, and I don't like looking at TV screens while I'm talking to somebody, and I sure as hell don't want to watch TV ads when I'm trying to talk to somebody. So I say, I'm not a bar person. I like, how about we, and that kind of thing.
yeah. Okay. That makes great sense. My second question, which is totally unrelated to this one, is what are your thoughts on if we're trying to create connection, help create connection in a meeting of disparate people?
Yeah.
Putting, sometimes people have a hard time starting to talk to people that they've never met before. What do you think of the idea of like little question cards that I've seen used, that they're like conversation starters?
So the question cards can be helped, but they're less important than other things we need to do to set the space. And I don't know how granular Fernando wants me to get in the time that we have. First of all, there's so many things to talk about here. First of all, the questions matter. And most people default to what I call data mining question. Where do you live? What do you do? How many kids do you have? Those are questions. They're usually classist and usually judgmental. So I travel around the world now, and I go to conferences with thousands of people there. And usually I'm asked within minutes, what do you do? Well, let's look at that. That's a data mining question, right? There's some data that they want. And then usually it's a setup for them to say something along the lines of, that's amazing, or that's interesting, or I've never heard of that, whatever they say. Well, that's a judgment. So they're setting up a conversation where they're going to data mine, judge, and announce. And it happens so often people don't even notice it's happening. How many places do you all want to go next year where your experience with meeting people is they're going to data mine you, judge you, and announce the judgment? How many of those events do you want to go to? Now, it's default. People are doing it aren't terrible people, but when I asked it in that form, you know exactly how many events you want to go to. So you'll notice I've asked nobody on this call what you do, and I don't ask anybody where I go what they do, unless they broach the subjects they want me to know, and then I'll play their game. So my point, and now data mining questions are not bad. If you're hosting conference for teachers, specifically teachers of 8th graders, it's okay to ask, do you teach 8th grade? And if so, where do you teach it? That's an okay question. But just notice that when we're trying to bring people together in powerful ways, that's not a powerful setup. It's also when we data mine people for their jobs, it's a classist setup, because people who clean rooms for the Holiday Inn don't really want to talk about that within the first 10 minutes. Maybe they're not embarrassed about it, but you know what? That's not what they came here to talk about. So we're also setting people up for a very classist conversation. So there's a much bigger conversation to be had about this. But one of the things I can leave with you is I set up people for an emotionally resonant conversation. So the quickest thing I can share in this space is we can always ask people about what inspired them to do something, what created their formation. Inspired, by the way, to be inspired is a feeling, not a data. What they're committed to. I don't need to use the word committed, but I'm asking what they're committed to now. To feel committed to something is an emotion. And what they aspire to accomplish. Your formation, your current commitment, and your aspirations are past, present, and future. Now I can ask about anything in your life at any time in your life in a way that isn't necessarily set up as a data mine. Kids, politics, art, education, sport. I can ask about anything, and I can say, Fernando, I'm curious. I've never been to this group before. Clearly, we're getting about a dozen people showing up. I'm curious what inspired you to bring together facilitators when you could be, quite frankly, facilitating something else right now. And you could be doing that, from Portugal. I didn't say, Fernando, why did you create this group? Now, some people can't hear the difference, but Fernando, why did you create this group? And Fernando, what inspired you to bring together facilitators and host it even when you're in Portugal? Totally different questions. And quite frankly, those are totally different conversations. And when Fernando starts answering that feeling question, what inspired you to create this, which was the past questions, he's going to talk about what he's creating now. And I get to, because I'm genuinely listening, ask about his current commitment. And I can't have that question yet because he hasn't spoken and I haven't listened. But you get the idea. Those are questions, but they're not questions to set up an event he doesn't want to be at. So when I see people usually start with questions, they're asking questions that I don't care about. I don't care about if you know about that. I don't care if you know my favorite color. I don't care if you know my favorite TV show. I don't care if you know about my favorite place to vacation. I don't care. And you know what? I largely don't care about your favorite vacation place either. Now, if there's something that's meaningful to you about that vacation place because there's a spiritual resonance there, a connection with your family, fine. But if you like drinking beer in Phuket, Thailand, I kind of don't care. God bless you. Right? But if you say, Charles, I'm curious, when you travel, what do you seek out that inspires you, that keeps you motivated to travel? Well, now there's an interesting conversation. Right? So my point is, questions can be great, but they're not great because they're questions. All right. I'm going to go one deeper. The setup is more important than the questions. If Fernando invites me to dinner at his house after I've been skiing till my legs are falling off in Revelstoke, and he hands me a stack of questions, says, here's a question you can tell people at this event, Charles. I'm like, oh my God. But if Fernando says, Charles, I'm so glad you came. I just want you to know I only invited people here who I know are spending their life connecting people in their communities, professional, neighborhood, so that people have more friends to call in the hard times. Here's a stack of questions to help make the conversations go more smoothly, since I know you don't know me here. Wow, that's an entirely different event. And the difference is he set up the activity, letting me understand that this group shares some value and purpose. In this case, the purpose is connect to people we care about so they're more resilient in tough times. So the questions didn't make that a great event. The questions are facilitating an aspiration of shared values and purpose, which tells me I'm in the right place, or at least not the wrong place. And then the other thing that's going on when Fernando says that is he's without saying the words, establishing himself as the host who has established certain rules that he's going to enforce. You're not here unless I understand you have these shared values and purpose, and you're going to participate in a way that connects. And if not, I'm going to handle that. And he's done all that by saying, welcome, Charles. I'm so glad you came. I've only invited people. And usually that conversation, which I'm, for the purpose of the example, talking about happens when I show up, usually that conversation happens in the invitation, which is why Priya Parker says the event starts at the invitation. When he says, Charles, you're skiing at Revelstoke. Hey, on Wednesday night, I'm hosting a dinner at my place. There's going to be frozen pizza and flat water. And I'd love for you to come because I'm inviting 15 people that I know are committed to connecting with people in their profession in unprecedented times. Some of them working in dangerous places like firefighters, emergency rooms, and school counseling centers. Oh, right. So now when I get those questions, it's not ridiculous. And Fernando's not stupid, so he's not going to, the first question is going to be, tell people your favorite vacation spot. Right. What was your first car? It's like, oh my gosh. So Allison, I hope that's helpful so that, I realize that I only have enough time to mention these things because I can go off there's a lot of layers here we're not touching. But by sharing it here, what I'm hoping is happening is I'm inoculating you from the cul-de-sacs people drive in very, very fast and then create toxic events. And I can see in real time how they're creating toxic events while they think they're checking the boxes, making a good event. So I hope this is helpful. That's the only reason why you're here, right? Is not to hear me talk about what I like to talk about.
Charles,
yeah.
Shall we get more questions from the group?
Yeah.
Because you love to go to questions. I know you. So, my dear people, let's do this. What questions do you want to ask Charles about this topic, the 3 AM friends, or something different that just popped for you?
I saw Elizabeth's hand twice.
Elizabeth.
I just put it in the notes too. And Charles, I know you mentioned that you would have served, pizza and seltzer water, but I'm, and maybe go down that path. But I'm curious, if you were in charge of that Google event, what might you have done to really?
So that was actually a multi-day event, and I just went for the middle day. And there have been many things that I've done differently. Google is a engineering run company, and engineers have a way of thinking. And it was not a terrible event, but that event was terrible, that part of it. And, they had the resources to do it. So let's just talk about bringing people together at a dinner. So first of all, I'm setting up the tables and tables of 6 or less, tables of 4. Okay. And that's because of the Brooks lines. Now, caterers typically want to do tables 8 or 10 because it's good for caterers. But for reasons you now understand, I would have set the table for 6 or less. Secondly, I would have made sure that I or someone who understood what they're doing opened the space with words. We can use other things besides words like music or ritual, but there needs to be a word where I'm establishing without saying it, I am the host, you are being hosted. There is an intention for this dinner other than to show you how much I can spend on catering, and that you are invited for this reason. Now, that might have already been implicit, but when I make it explicit, it brings a solemnity and a focus to the space that doesn't exist before then. So if I'm with Rosa and we're in a room of 125 teachers, and they know why they showed up because the name of the event is Teachers for Freedom, it still helps if when there's a moment where we all take silence and say, first of all, I want to acknowledge you that you showed up for Teachers for Freedom, and everybody in this room, you understood that this event is for teachers to speak to each other, to learn how to, whatever, right? And what I'm doing in that is I'm sacredizing the space. I'm establishing without saying it, the rules in this space are different than the rules outside this space. People are here filtered in a different way, and the conversations that we're going to have are motivated differently here than they will be in 4 hours at a bar. But I don't say that. That's just what's happening. And there's acknowledgement. The other thing that would happen is I'd make sure that it was set up so that it was a pleasant place to sit. Like obviously have to be warm or cool enough. There needs to be enough light without too much light. There's all. I write about this in my latest book. Like you have to handle that. It can't be everything is great, and then it's so dark people don't know where they are. And you've all been to bars where it's so dark you didn't know where you were. Okay, it can't be everything's great, and like the garbage hasn't been taken out, and so it just reeks. And you're like, you know what? There's only one thing that like wasn't that great. And you're like, yeah, well, we're smelling rotting garbage. So you have to make the space comfortable. As opposed to this particular event I went to, you put the light where you want the attention. That's one reason why bars are terrible. So when you go to the theater, where do they put the light? Where they want your attention. When you go to a sacred service, where do they put the light? Where they want your attention. You know, I'll give you a quick hint. If you go into any sacred space anywhere in the world from any century, and there's something in the middle lifted up and lit, it's probably important. At this particular event at Google, they hadn't lit the room for a banquet because they were using a training space. And so they had actually lit the outside of the room just because they had diffused lighting in the architecture. And nobody had spent the $300 on LED lights to put them on the table. So there was light in the center of the table where you want attention, and turn down the room lights, right? It sounds like a small thing. It's not when you're in a space of 125 people and they didn't light where they want the attention. The next thing is I make sure that everybody has name tags big enough to be read 10 feet away. And the reason why 10 feet away is I don't need to go up 3 feet away to see, Victoria, is that you? Did we meet last year? You look familiar. From 10 feet, it was like, oh yes, that's Victoria. We talked last year. And what this group did was they had name tags that had hung perfectly at belly button level, that had big font for reading a newspaper, but lousy font for reading from 10 feet away at a conference. And let me tell you, I had to look at a lot of belly buttons. And I knew that it was awkward, so I said, excuse me, Victoria, I'm just gonna look at your belly button. Oh, you're Victoria from Winnipeg. Got it. Yeah. We met last year, if I remember correctly. What the hell is that all about? And then, of course, when I'm at a place to meet other people, sitting at a table of 6, because it's not gonna be table of 8 as they set up, I don't want Victoria's Winnipeg name tag below the table. Right? And people pretend like they remember names and they don't. So she's going to say when we sit down at the beginning, like, oh, I'm Victoria from Winnipeg. I think we met last. Oh, that's right. And 30 minutes later, we're not going to remember names anymore because the names are below the. It's just. Anyway, I could go. There's a whole conversation about name tags, which I could go into, but I'm not going to do that for now, Fernando. And then I want to make sure that there are moments through the meal that remind and honor the commitment of the gathering, which is one reason why toasts in a wedding can be powerful. We all know we're here for the wedding. The couple's married. Nobody's confused about that, right? And yet it can be powerful when somebody related to that couple's commitment says, while we're all here, I would just like to say out loud, it's a wonderful thing to be here because. Okay. Now that can be done poorly, but having punctuated ritual events, in this case, it was a 5-course meal, can be powerful, right? If it's not too distracting, because we want to give people that time to have that campfire experience. And then the least that needs to happen then is maybe at the beginning of the dessert or 10 minutes into the dessert, the host gets up again, because remember, the host is controlling the space. It's keeping, I say controlling the space, but when I say controlling, I mean is making the space safe because somebody's watching. And by the way, if Charles starts going on the racist rant, people expect Fernando to stand up and say, are you okay, Charles? Have you slept okay? Are you on medication? Let's take a step out and see what's going on. And if Fernando's like, you know what? Everybody's an adult here. They can handle it. And they're like, whoa. What's going on here? Right now, fortunately, I don't go on racist rants. Fernando doesn't have to pull me aside and see if, on medication. But the point is, if he doesn't step up, there's a sense like, whoa, the host isn't hosting. So for dessert, let's stand up and acknowledge the event and celebrate it, and then speak to the future. So just like in theater, right, we want to acknowledge the past that formed us to bring us here, what's happening here that's special enough that we showed up, and the future we're going to create such that we spent this time together. But these are all very sophisticated ideas that are way above the perception of most people who create events. And I don't want to overwhelm you with this because you don't need them all. Warm soup, crusty bread, and no band distracting us for 3 hours is like a perfectly good evening. But if we really want to get in the weeds and create something that seems magical to the people who show up, there are layers that we can add to the experience. And they can't name, oh, Fernando really established a safe space and the intention here and acknowledged our commitment and put us in a legacy of professionals that would, they don't name that. It just seems magical to them that when Fernando hosts, it's just a wonderful evening. But then I can name it and we can name it, and thus we can train in these things. So I hope that's helpful, Elizabeth.
So let's move into breakouts quickly to come back with some questions because we still have 20 minutes. So I'll open the rooms to be in groups of 3 and 4. Quickly discuss if there is a burning question, something or comment to bring back to the room. and then we'll spend the last minutes together. Okay? Here we go.
And to have that, you know, expressed, that was very good. The feeling was good anyway. Fernando.
Okay, we have 50 minutes, 3 groups. Simple math, more or less 5 minutes per group. So let's not waste any minutes. Shall we call room 2? David, Olympia, no, it's actually Michael, not Olympia, and Robin. Do you have a burning question to throw?
Well, Michael, your question, maybe we could tag team on it, because I was appointed the spokesperson as the timer was running out, which was really convenient. Like, how about David? So I'll pull you in too, Michael.
I'll cue it up, you bet.
Yeah, just talking about conflict. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so what we're seeing, Charles, is your advice is good and solid, but it from my viewpoint, it's entering into a room where there's a fairly neutral environment. I walk into rooms that are all the time full of conflict. So the community is broken down. They're fighting like cats and dogs. They don't like one another, whatever that looks like. And I'm always struggling with how do you build community in that environment when the community has broken down. So we were curious about what are some first steps in that kind of a non-neutral environment that we all can use to build a sense of community and make forward progress. David, did I do justice to that?
You did that so well. Yeah, seriously.
All right. So yes, these are much more advanced conversations. And usually when people say, well, we're in conflict, it's because trust and compassion is no longer in the space. And remember I said that we need to have shared values and purpose, right? Well, I think that when there's a conflict enough where it threatens the very fabric, there is not a perception of shared values and purpose in the room. And that's because trust and compassion are no longer there. And there's an entire field of conflict resolution and mediation. And so out of respect to that field, I'm going to acknowledge that that is not my lane. Because people literally get PhDs in just small parts of this, and I'm not going to pretend I can sum that up as a plugin on my work. When I am seeking help for conflict resolution, I turn to the body of work, Nonviolent Communication, which I think may have recently changed their name. And I know a number of professional practitioners in that, and I found it to be very, very helpful. I'm certain there are many other helpful tools out there. But we need to not ignore when there's insufficient trust and compassion to then bring people together peacefully. Because the first rule of bringing a community together is there needs to be, the space needs to be safe enough. The reason I say safe enough in my latest book is what's safe among 30-year-old Army veterans who've been to war together is going to look different than kindergarten teachers in Vermont. It'll look different, but each of them needs a space that's safe enough for them to have a possibly vulnerable experience. So I hope that's helpful.
Maybe a follow-up on that, since maybe we still have more of our 5-minute chunk. So I liked what you said about, so it sounds like there's trust and compassion are no longer in the space. Where my mind goes is, how do we then rebuild trust and the skill of compassion, right? So maybe it's not even the conflict resolution. I mean, that's part of it in NVC, but like, what are your thoughts on rebuilding trust and compassion?
Well, I think NVC does a lot of work on this, and we know that people need to believe they're heard. And if they don't believe they're heard, even if we've all heard it, they're going to keep repeating it and usually do so loudly, and it just becomes a distraction. And then people need to believe that other people are not out to get them. Even if there is no one out to get them, they need to believe that that is so.
Need to feel it, I would say, like a visceral experience.
Yeah, and I don't fully understand that at the level of people who spend, without exaggeration, decades of their lives exploring this. Actually, I've been very, very impressed with the insight and what they can distinguish in a difficult relationship. And that's why, I think the number one hubris of thought leaders is thinking because people ask us questions about our field, we must know about all the other fields. And so that's why I'm trying to be very, very, very transparent about that.
Sure.
I've been very impressed with that. But that needs to happen. And then there's a whole nother layer of maturity that I deal with in my, a model of maturity that I deal with in my work that's been around since the 1970s called spiral dynamics. And we don't have time to go into it, but you can Google it. And certainly in my work with Fernando, we've referenced it. And the reason why it's a good place to reference is people are coming into the conversation from different levels of maturity. And this is just one model. It's not the truth. It's not how the world works. It's just a model to understand where people are. If someone has different priorities and has different goals and relationships because of where they are, and we don't understand that, if we pretend that we're all here for the same reasons, with the same values, with the same purpose, we're going to fail. Because we're not going to acknowledge a person in spiral dynamics who's green and cares most about people getting along and being included is very different than someone who's bringing an orange conversation where they want to show people that they can win the game. And they are different, right? There are people who wear fancy brands where we can see them so that we can see they wear fancy brands. And then you have people like me that I'd be embarrassed if you saw me wearing the fancy brands. That doesn't make them bad and me good, but we just are showing up differently for different accomplishments. And if David's mediating and you don't understand that, and you're just trying to bring us all to the same page to get, like, that's not going to work. And so my point in bringing this up is it's more complicated than do these things. You know, we have to understand. And then there's a whole other layer of our relationship to vulnerability. There's at least 3 different cultures relative to vulnerability. And, you know, one of them, the so-called honor culture, there is no obvious escape valve for men defending their honor except to create conflict and dominating. And that's one reason in the American South we see heightened politeness, because that's the workaround from an offense that a man has to defend honor. Well, if you have someone who feels slighted and they're coming from honor culture and they have to dominate someone to get their honor back, they're just on an automatic pilot. And if you have someone like me who spent time in New York where there is no honor to defend, we just use the F word and keep walking. We're like, why are we still in this conversation? Right? I thought we're done with this already. Right? So there are these layers and layers that need to be understood if we're going to actually do the hard work of bringing people together who are in conflict and not just treat it as some trivial manner of checklists.
Totally.
And the beginning is recognizing, okay, we're missing trust and compassion, and there's more to it than just pretending we're going to get along.
Yeah.
Just be mindful of time. Room 1, Victoria, Camila, and Allison. To have
Girls,
a question.
Can I go ahead and ask about what we were? Yeah. So right now I'm hosting retreats for women, for really small groups, like 3-4 women. I rent an apartment, and my invitation is for them to have 3 days for themselves, things that they don't have because they're moms, because they're busy working, because they never stop to think about themselves, and they are so disconnected from who they are. So the reason I created this space is for them to slow down, look at themselves, connect to 3 or other women going through what they are also going through. So my question is, I recently started this, so I feel very insecure because I have, as a experienced designer, I have this paper where I try to come up with this. Okay, so the intention for the meeting will be this, the activities will be these and these, and at the end the result will be blah blah blah. And then when I am there hosting, I want to be fully present and more fluid, and I want to feel what emerges from that group. So I don't even know what I'm asking. I don't know if you have any insights on what I've just said. Like, how can I don't know, be not so attached or to this structure and be more connected to the group? I don't know. To develop this sensibility.
What your participants want. I don't understand, but you know, I don't understand what they're going to experience, and I don't understand how you're delivering it. And that's not to say that it's not worth doing. I just don't understand that whatsoever. So I'll just stick with a basic fundamental. People show up and return because they're growing in some way they want to grow. And the way retired Army vets who've been at war for 10 years want to grow are different than Brazilian moms. It's just different. And if you deliver the Brazilian mom opportunity to grow to the Washington Army vets, you're going to have a lousy event, and vice versa. So you said, how do you need to understand in what way they want to grow? And in my work, we call that a way of being. So I cook, so we'll use the example of cooks. Fernando can invite me to 3 very, very different events. Knife sharpening, both Asian and European knives. Fruit selection, Southeast Asian and African. And fish cleaning. Right? Shellfish and fillets. Those are radically different events. They don't even smell the same. But they're all appropriate if they help me be the cook I want to be. So we get away from the doing, right? Gee, we didn't even touch food when we were talking about knives and rubbing them on stones. We didn't even touch food, but it's an appropriate event. So the same thing is with the women you're inviting. I don't know what they want to be, but here's my guess, and it's a guess, Camilla, and if I'm wrong, it's because you know your people in your event, that you're offering them something way too selfish and solipsistic. Largely, we don't want to have an enduring relationship with things that are just about serving us and making us feel good. Maybe for an hour, maybe for half a day, maybe for a day. But if they're coming to spend that time with you and others, they have some aspiration to make a difference for others. And now they don't want it to be only one way, right? That's burnout. But otherwise, they go do this on their own. They can get a credit card and, find somewhere with, good massages. And that's the big mistake a lot of hosts make, is they think it's transactional. Whereas when people come together, including this group, by the way, everyone on this call, unless I'm wrong, and then Fernando will laugh at me, you want to make a difference for other people. And if this was just about you getting what you want and not contributing to other people, this group would feel flat to you. And you may not be able to name it, but there's something like too transactional about it. Said differently, you want to contribute. So when we're bringing people together who want to connect, remember, people who want to connect. There are people who are sociopaths who just want to extract. Fair enough. When we're bringing people together who want to connect, we need to understand at some level they want to contribute and give them room to do that. And my guess is, since you're coming back, is Fernando and Carolina have given you a chance to contribute in some way that's meaningful to you. An opportunity to contribute. I don't know if you're successful or not. Am I right about that? I see Fernando nodding, but I don't know if anybody else is, so.
Yeah, I have 2 minutes left and a hard decision to make. We can start closing now, or we can go over some minutes. So
I
don't like to go over. So Rosa, do you have anything from your group too? How is your group going? Rosa, Laura, Sylvia, and Elizabeth. The question, how did Fernando?
I don't think there's this burning question. I mean, maybe he can end what inspired him. I want to go into the inspire, commit, and aspire for you, because those are powerful questions. And I may have missed this, but what inspired you to do this work? And then there's probably a story involved in this, because I look at your 8 principles and I see that the story principle is one of the foundational pieces, and it says it's one of the most powerful ways that we can connect. So do you have one to end for us?
Yeah, but not the time we have. The story points to the fact that I spent years of my life doing what could be called activism. I worked on homelessness challenges in the United States, which is a rich country. I served in the U.S. Peace Corps during the AIDS epidemic. I organized restaurant laborers in New York City. And then for 7 years, I was a PBS genocide filmmaker, telling the stories of genocide survival and healing. And in all of those commitments, I didn't have enough resources for strictly transactional relationships, that I had to learn how to bring people together around shared values and purpose to make a difference. And if I didn't do that, I couldn't be successful. And I wasn't very successful until those skills grew. And then I went to graduate school, and I studied religion. And one of the things you do is I got to study people who have stayed together for over 1,000 years. And I remember being moved in class thinking I could leave the classroom that moment and find Jains and find Hindus. And I could find people who had stayed together for over 1,000 years and still do so around shared values and purpose. And then I discovered when I started talking to business folk that they really struggled with bringing people together in ways that were non-transactional, because they were trained to think about and then offer transactional relationships. And that goes as far as it goes, and it doesn't work anymore. And in my first book, when you read it, I talk about meeting Kevin Lynn and how I learned that he struggled. And so then after all these years, at this point, decades, I went home to write what I thought was going to be a 10-page paper to help him. And it turned out to be book length. And then the first publisher that saw it wanted to publish it. And now we're talking.
Thank you. See right there,
Okay.
the essence, you know, you get goosebumps when you hear people's personal stories. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just put a question in the chat for you to take away with you. That's one thing that we also work on our side, right, Carolina? What can you do? What is practical about this? And maybe you can just answer in the chat quickly. What is one takeaway you're getting from this 1 hour and a half that we spent together? Just put it quickly in the chat. And then we close. Emotionally resonate conversation, always expand the friends base, inspired ideas. You don't need fireworks to create meaningful events or meetings. Appreciation, and also a string of prompts built around inspire, commit, and inspire. Wow, that's lovely. Stick not to facilitating the status quo ways. Nice. Charles, for me, it's always a pleasure to listen to you answer questions, and it's amazing to see how much knowledge you have and how you transform complex things in simple things for us to understand and start taking action. So really appreciate your time with us here. Okay. Anyone want to say hello, bye to Charles, and we close. We are 3 minutes over time, sorry.
I'm excited to read your book.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for
everybody.
coming. Come to the next as well. We'll be with Ezra, our dear friend, another New Yorker.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the book on name tags, or just the blog if one exists.
Yeah, I haven't written about name tags yet. That's something I can do. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good time
Friend,
in
you want me to log
Portugal,
off now,
Carolina,
or
Fernando.
you want me to stay on for a few minutes? What do you want me to do?
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can stay for a couple minutes.
I'm at your service.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you for organizing, Fernando, and
Thank
Carolina.
you, Rosa.
Thank you, Rosa.